Jared Bryant walked out of the gleaming glass and steel facade of the city's most exclusive private medical centre, a suffocating despair clinging to him like a shroud. How could this be happening? Why her? Just last week, he should have been marrying Alexa Fisher, the luminous, vivacious woman who was the very light of his life. Instead, Alexa had been struck down by a sudden, bewildering illness, one so severe it had landed her in this gilded cage of a clinic, a place of hushed efficiency and exorbitant fees. He had poured staggering sums into the clinic's account, a torrent of money meant to buy health, but Alexa's condition stubbornly refused to yield, her vibrancy dimming day by agonizing day. Where else could he turn? Who else could he beg for help? He thought, a dull ache blooming in his chest as he stared at the cracked pavement beneath his expensive leather shoes. Suddenly, a small pair of feet, clad in scuffed, brightly coloured children's sneakers, appeared beside his own. He lifted his gaze, his eyes still clouded with worry, and saw a wisp of a girl, no older than 9, standing beside him. She looked like she'd been living rough, her clothes smudged, but her posture was surprisingly direct. "Mister," she piped up, her voice surprisingly clear, "could you spare some change for bread? I'll pray to the heavens for you, I promise." Her eyes, a startling, deep sapphire blue, held his gaze, ancient and piercing, like 2 drops of twilight sky. Jared stopped, a jolt running through him. He pulled a crisp $50 bill from his wallet. "Here," he said, his voice husky. "And yes, please pray. But not for me. Pray for my fiancée, Alexa." "Alexa," the girl echoed, her sapphire eyes darkening further as if mirroring a distant storm. "Is she sick?" "Yes," Jared sighed, the word heavy with sorrow. "It's been a month now. The doctors can't pinpoint a diagnosis, no matter what they try to do to support her. She just keeps fading, like a candle flickering out." His voice cracked, a raw edge of despair seeping through. "But she's so young, so full of life, so please, pray that the doctors finally find the right medication, or I swear I'll go mad." The girl took the bill. Then, to Jared's astonishment, she spoke again, her childlike voice carrying an unsettling weight. "I'll pray, of course. My grandma taught me to pray for everyone, the good and the bad. But for the sickness your fiancé has, there are no medicines." "What do you mean, no medicines?" Jared exclaimed, a bewildered frown creasing his brow. "I'm a businessman myself. I deal in pharmaceutical supplies. I can get anything from anywhere, if I just know what it is." "It won't help," the girl declared, waving her small hand dismissively, her certainty absolute. "Her soul is aching, rotting from the inside out. Medicines can't fix that." She sighed a deep, world-weary sound that seemed too old for her small frame, then turned and darted away, melting into the bustling city crowd like a phantom. "Wait, where are you going?" The bewildered businessman tried to ask more questions, but she was gone, leaving him standing there utterly alone and more confused than ever. "She's a quick one, and what on earth could she possibly mean? Her soul is aching?" Jared had met Alexa under the strangest of circumstances. She had flagged down his sleek obsidian black luxury sedan at the entrance to town, her hand a delicate beacon, asking for a ride to the downtown district. Normally, he barely registered the hitchhikers on the roadside, a blur of faces in his peripheral vision. Lost in her captivating presence, Jared knew instantly he couldn't drive past. And on the way, he discovered that she was not only stunning, but also remarkably intelligent, and an utterly fascinating conversationalist. She told him a hilarious, if slightly shocking, story about a weekend trip with college friends to a summer house in the forest. They'd gotten wildly drunk and, as she delicately put it, engaged in some rather spirited activities with a group of local guys. Alexa, unwilling to participate in the debauchery, had simply decided to escape, hailing the first car she saw. His. Jared chuckled heartily at her tale. Seriously? You mean you didn't know your classmates were prone to such escapades? Well, imagine that. I didn't, Alexa said, her smile as dazzling and pure as fresh snow, a stark contrast to the bawdy story. At the university, everyone presents themselves so differently. I would never have guessed that the moment their parents left the country, they'd completely unravel, like threads coming loose from a tightly woven tapestry. And what are you studying? He asked, intrigued. Psychology, she replied, a thoughtful frown creasing her brow. Now, I'm not even sure if I chose the right profession, especially if my future colleagues are such thrill-seekers. Oh, I wouldn't go that far, Jared said, a little relieved by her earnestness. I think they just wanted to let loose, being young and all. So, you think that kind of behaviour is normal? Alexa retorted, her full lips already perfectly sculpted, pouting in indignation. Oh, no, not at all. Jared quickly corrected himself, a slight blush rising in his cheeks. I certainly wouldn't want to meet a woman with that kind of history. He glanced at his passenger, whose delicate eyebrows were now furrowed in concentration, and a thought surfaced. She's so earnest, so serious. That's rare among young people these days. They then spoke of music, of art, of architecture, and Jared became utterly convinced that this woman was, as the saying goes, his other half. Intelligent, broadly cultivated, strikingly beautiful, and subtly perfumed with some intoxicating ethereal scent, she captured his heart in a matter of minutes. When he dropped her off in the bustling city centre, she scribbled her phone number on a tiny scrap of paper. The next time Jared had to negotiate with a notoriously difficult group of suppliers, he decided on a whim to bring her along. He knew that attractive women on a negotiation team could work a subtle magic on male counterparts, subtly disarming them. So he introduced Alexa as his new assistant, and throughout the meeting he watched with quiet satisfaction as the male members of the opposing team practically devoured her with their eyes. The contract was signed on remarkably favourable terms for Jared, and from that day forward he began to refer to Alexa as his personal good luck charm, his silent, beautiful talisman. And no major negotiation now proceeded without her insightful presence, her sharp mind proving as invaluable as her charm. Soon after, Jared presented her with a glittering diamond engagement ring, its facets catching the light like frozen tears, and officially announced her as his fiancée. His parents, pillars of the community, reacted with a cautious benevolence towards their son's choice, yet, in their quiet, knowing ways, they often subtly hinted that Alexa Fisher wasn't entirely forthcoming with him. Just think, Jared, his mother, a woman whose intuition was as sharp as her perfectly tailored suits, would gently prod. She still hasn't introduced you to her parents, even though she speaks of them as honest and decent people. Why wouldn't she invite you home? Is she ashamed of something? Jared himself felt a faint ripple of unease, a nagging question as to why Alexa so diligently avoided conversations about her family. Judging by her elegant demeanour and impeccable taste, her parents surely seemed well off, perhaps even affluent. What then was holding her back? Less than 2 weeks before their meticulously planned autumn wedding, the unthinkable happened. Alexa, unexpectedly collapsed, falling unconscious right in the middle of a high-stakes business meeting. From that moment on, she couldn't regain her strength. Jared immediately rushed her to a premier private clinic, securing the most opulent VIP suite available, sparing no expense. He even made a significant charitable donation to the hospital, hoping to buy some extra goodwill, some hidden advantage. But the head physician, Dr. Alan Cruz, a renowned specialist who took on Alexa's case, could only offer a helpless shrug, his expression a mix of bewilderment and frustration. "Muscle weakness of unknown etiology," he murmured, using the sterile language of diagnosis. "There's nothing we can do, Mr. Bryant. We've exhausted every conventional avenue." For several bewildering weeks, Jared was told that their VIP patient was subjected to the most cutting-edge diagnostic procedures, the most expensive laboratory analyses, yet not a single physiological anomaly could be detected. Alexa, meanwhile, was literally fading before his eyes. Dark, bruise-like circles bloomed beneath her lower eyelids. Her chin and cheekbones sharpened unnaturally, and her once sculpted cheeks hollowed out, making her look frail and ancient, like a withered flower. Jared was beside himself, his usual composure shattered by a raw, unadulterated fear. And most perplexing of all, every attempt he made to inform her parents of her grave illness was met with a weak but firm refusal. "Please, Jared, don't needlessly worry them," she'd whisper, her voice thin as spun sugar. "They're elderly and they worry so easily." Driven by a desperate need for answers, Jared decided to take matters into his own hands. He got hold of her parents' address and drove out there. A faded suburban street he never imagined she'd call home. The door, painted a chipped robin's egg blue, was opened by an elderly woman with a shock of completely white hair, soft as dandelion fluff, who invited him inside with a hesitant, almost nervous gesture. He stepped into the cramped entryway and was struck by the humble, almost impoverished state of the home. The apartment was impeccably clean, meticulously tidy, but it was clear no renovations had been done since the building's original construction decades ago. The worn furniture looked as though it longed for the solace of a junkyard, and the faded striped curtains seemed to have drifted straight from the set of a vintage black and white film. "Hello," Jared began uncertainly, his voice feeling strangely loud in the quiet space, addressing both the elderly woman and a similarly white-haired gentleman who had appeared beside her. "Is Alexa your daughter?" "Alexa? What happened to her? We haven't seen her in ages," the old woman stammered, her voice trembling slightly. "She's in the hospital," Jared explained, the words feeling heavy on his tongue. "I'm her fiancée." She didn't tell you anything about us?" The elderly couple exchanged a bewildered glance, shaking their heads, which indeed resembled two fluffy white dandelions. Jared's mother, he realised with a pang, had been right all along. Alexa was hiding something, and now the painful truth clicked into place. She was simply ashamed of her family, ashamed of their modest home. But then a new jarring question surfaced. Where did she get all those designer clothes? The ridiculously expensive smartphone? All the other pricey trinkets? Jared, a man of direct action, decided to confront her parents to get to the bottom of this unsettling mystery. "Please tell me honestly," he began, his gaze unwavering as he looked from one to the other. "Is Alexa your biological daughter?" The woman looked helplessly at her husband, then back at Jared, and tears, slow and heavy, began to track paths down her wrinkled cheeks. "Is she not our own, even if we took her from the orphanage when she was 3 years old?" she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Some woman brought her to the gates and simply abandoned her there. She was only 6 months old. It was a miracle the guard even noticed the tiny bundle in the snow, or she would have frozen to death. There was no note, no documents. Nobody knew where she came from or whose she was. My wife, Adeline, and I, the elderly man, a gentle soul named Forrest, chimed in, his voice raspy with age, and he looked at his wife, a deep, abiding love in his eyes. We have lived without children for so long, and what joy is there in a home without a child's laughter? So we decided to adopt the little one. We both worked at school, and we tried our best to raise our little Alexa right. She took language lessons, went to art classes, and even learned ballroom dancing. Her recital costumes were so expensive, but we bought her everything. We never spared any expense on her upbringing. But when she grew up, Adeline continued, a fresh wave of tears, it was as if something bit her. She started to reproach us, saying, "Why did you adopt me? You spend so much money on me. You should have fixed up the apartment instead. I'm ashamed to invite my friends over. She's always threatened to move out, to get her own place, and we hardly saw her lately, always busy with business affairs." "So, she found a fiancé, did she?" Forrest added, his gaze troubled. Jared listened to the elderly woman, then the man in complete bewilderment, his mind reeling. Was all this truly about her? His beloved Alexa? He was so utterly stunned, so deeply shaken, that he no longer knew how to feel about her, how to reconcile the woman he loved with this shattering new reality. Later Jared promised them, his voice heavy with a promise he wasn't sure he could keep, that he would absolutely bring them to their daughter's wedding once she recovered, though, in his heart, he now almost doubted the marriage would ever take place. And now the encounter with the homeless little girl shook him even more profoundly. How on earth did she know about Alexa? And why did she say with such chilling certainty that Alexa's soul, not her body, was sick? Plagued by these heavy, disorienting thoughts, Jared Bryant made a grim decision. He wouldn't marry Alexa Fisher until he uncovered the full, unvarnished truth. Ideas, wild and desperate, spiraled feverishly through his mind, a chaotic cascade of how to uncover the unspoken illness of Alexa's soul, the one hinted at by the enigmatic street girl in the hospital courtyard. Finally, a flash of memory. He recalled a brand new, nearly invisible spy camera, barely half an inch in size, tucked away in the safe of his home office. Years ago, when he was just starting his first venture, Jared had intended to install the tiny device in his fledgling office to discreetly monitor his employees' behaviour in his absence. The camera had stayed there for only a week. Jared had quickly realised that his suspicions of their idleness were unfounded. Everyone on his small team remained diligently at their desks during working hours, barely even stepping out for a smoke break. He had removed the camera then, convinced it was unnecessary, and simply stashed it away in his safe, a relic of a bygone paranoia. Now, it seemed, its true purpose had arrived. The following day, Jared walked into Alexa's luxurious hospital suite, carrying a bouquet of pristine white roses, their petals still dewy. Seeing him, Alexa offered a faint, almost ethereal smile and weakly stirred her hand, as if attempting to beckon him closer. He moved to her bedside, the scent of antiseptic barely masking the subtle, sweet fragrance of the roses. He leaned down and kissed her forehead. It struck him as odd, a jarring note in the symphony of his distress, that she still smelled of her signature perfume, a delicate, intoxicating aroma that had always made his head spin. But he pushed the thought aside, forcing himself to focus. He busied himself arranging the roses in a sleek, modern glass vase he'd brought, discreetly fastening the tiny camera to one of the slender stems. With a casual flick of his wrist, he plucked an extra leaf, ensuring it wouldn't obstruct the miniature lens. Then he picked up a printed receipt from the bedside table, a hefty bill for the complex diagnostic procedures, and the specialised nutrient solutions being administered intravenously through her drip. With a tight nod, he exited the room. He was itching to connect to his laptop, where the camera's feed would transmit, but he forced himself to wait until evening, a tense patience he rarely possessed. That evening, alone in his study, what he witnessed nearly triggered a heart attack. After his departure, Alexa lay still for only a few more minutes. Then, with an almost imperceptible shift, she slowly, gracefully rose from the bed. With a practised ease that chilled him to the bone, she unhooked the intravenous drip from the catheter in her arm, the fluid-filled bag swaying gently like a macabre pendulum, and calmly walked into the private bathroom. Moments later, she emerged, no longer in the pale hospital gown, but in a flowing silk peignoir that shimmered in the room's soft light. She then strolled to the small kitchenette area, filled an electric kettle and watched it boil. She poured herself half a cup of steaming tea, accompanied by a small piece of dark chocolate, savouring it with an alarming normalcy. Afterward, she tidied up meticulously, wiping down the counter. Then she stood before the mirror, taking cotton pads soaked in a clear liquid and expertly wiping away the dark circles from beneath her eyes, revealing smooth, unblemished skin beneath. Jared, watching this unfolding charade, could barely breathe, his lungs seizing in his chest. After removing what was clearly stage makeup, his fiancée began to apply fresh cosmetics to her face, skillfully contouring her cheeks, adding a healthy flush, and carefully defining her eyes. She brushed out her long dark hair, teasing it into a voluminous, healthy style, and then walked to the large window, looking out at the city lights. And then the door to her suite quietly clicked open. The chief physician, Dr. Alan Kruth, stepped inside. He quietly closed the door, turning the lock with a soft click from the inside. He then walked directly to Alexa, wrapped his arms around her and kissed her deeply, passionately, a kiss that lingered and spoke of illicit intimacy. Then, hand in hand, they moved towards the comfortable, pristine hospital bed. But Jared couldn't watch any more. The image shattered his world. He tore his gaze from the screen, covering his face with trembling hands, and burst into racking sobs. "Alexa! Alexa, how could you?" He didn't remember how much time passed, only the raw, burning pain in his chest. It must have been deep into the night when he, staggering with a sudden overwhelming weakness, stumbled into his garage. "I'll kill them both," he muttered, the words raw and guttural, as he sped through the deserted streets, his black sedan a predator's shadow, heading toward the medical centre. The security guard at the hospital gate, seeing the late-night visitor, initially hesitated, his expression one of weary reluctance. But a crisp $100 bill pressed into his palm did its silent work, and the barrier slowly lifted. Jared roared into the hospital courtyard. Lights still glowed in Alexa's window, a beacon of betrayal. He had an insane urge to hurl a stone through it, but he managed barely to restrain himself. Climbing the stairs to the second floor, Jared quietly tapped on the door to her suite. "Come in," a surprised female voice, unmistakably Alexa's, called out. As he entered, she dropped the book she was holding, her face blanching, her eyes widening with a look he'd never seen before, a flicker of pure, unadulterated terror. "Feeling better, my love?" he asked, his voice a strained whisper, doing his utmost to betray no hint of the seething rage within him. "Yes, Jared," she replied softly, her voice still a little breathless. "I actually felt a strange sense of relief today." "So, all that expensive treatment isn't in vain, then?" he pressed, his gaze piercing, betraying nothing. "It seems not," she agreed, her brows furrowed slightly, still not understanding the dangerous undercurrent of his questions. "Then we'll be getting married very soon, won't we?" he said, stepping closer. "Jared, darling, a wedding is such an exhausting affair, and I'm still terribly weak." Alexa tried to demur, her voice shaking on a familiar feigned fragility, but he wasn't listening. He pulled out his smartphone, swiped open the hidden video recording from the camera, and turned the screen towards her. "Weak, you say?" Alexa squinted, curious, leaning forward to peer at the video footage. But as soon as the first few frames flickered into view, the image of her rising from the bed, detaching the IV, walking to the bathroom, she gasped. Her eyes widened in horror. With a sudden, astonishing burst of strength, she sprang from the bed and bolted for the corridor. Jared lunged after her, but she seemed to vanish as if swallowed by the earth itself. He frantically questioned the startled night nurse, then the security guard downstairs, but no one had seen a patient in a silk peignoir sprint out of the clinic. The next morning he returned to the hospital, desperate to confront the chief physician, to demand an explanation. But Dr. Kruth was nowhere to be found. His secretary, a woman with a perpetually nervous demeanour, informed him that he had been urgently called away to the Department of Health. The distraught fiancé stumbled toward the hospital parking garage, his mind a turbulent storm of confusion and despair. Suddenly, a familiar high-pitched child's voice cut through the hum of traffic and his own spiralling thoughts. "Mum, could you spare some change for bread? I'll pray for you." He spun around and saw just a few feet away the same street girl. This time, Jared resolved he wouldn't let her slip away. He quietly approached from behind, gently placing his hands on her small shoulders. The girl turned, and to his surprise, didn't try to pull away. Instead, she broke into a wide, disarming grin. "Oh, hi, kind mister. You came back? Were you visiting Alexa again?" Jared merely nodded, a silent acknowledgement of his torment. "So, she's still not better? I even lit a candle for her health," the girl murmured, her brow furrowed with concern. "You really are something special, aren't you?" Jared praised her, his voice rough with emotion, looking into her startlingly deep sapphire eyes. "Could you tell me how you know all about her?" "I don't know anything," the little girl tried to protest, her eyes flitting away. "Oh, but you do," Jared pressed gently. "You said her soul was sick, and it turns out you were right." "Really? How did you find that out?" A flicker of pure, unadulterated curiosity lit up the girl's eyes, momentarily eclipsing the street-wise caution. "Well, how about this? You tell me about Alexa first, and then I'll tell you what I learned. Maybe we can even get to know each other. I'm Jared." "And I'm Ivy," the girl replied, pointing to an empty bench in the hospital's small manicured garden. "Maybe we should sit over there." They settled onto the weathered wooden bench, and Ivy began to speak, her story unfolding with the disarming directness of a child, yet carrying the weight of a painful history. "Alexa, she's my mum's twin sister," Ivy began, her voice soft but clear, like a pebble dropping into still water. "Only Mum never knew about her before. She thought she was the only one my Grandma and Grandpa had. You know, just Mum and the folks. But then Grandma and Grandpa, they passed away, and it was just Mum and me. Dad left us when I was 5. "Wait," Jared interrupted, a jolt of surprise. "You have a mother?" "Oh, yeah," Ivy said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "She works as a cleaner all day, you know, to pay for the shelter." "You live in a shelter?" Jared asked, picturing the grimy, overcrowded places he had sometimes seen on the news. "I don't know. Mum just calls it the shelter." Ivy shrugged, her small shoulders rising and falling. "We used to have an apartment. Mum worked as a nurse and I went to kindergarten. Then Alexa showed up. I was just about to start 1st grade then. I was sitting with my book, minding my own business," Ivy continued, her gaze distant, recalling the moment. "I heard the window open and some noise. I went to look, and there was this strange lady standing there, looking exactly like my mum. But she was dressed differently, and her hair was all fancy. I asked her, 'Who are you and how did you get in here?' And she laughed. 'Oh, I flew in from the sky like Mary Poppins.' But I ran to get Mum. Alexa came after me, and as soon as Mum saw her, she just said, 'Hi, sis.' And Mum, she just collapsed, like all the air went out of her." Ivy paused, her eyes wide. "Then Alexa told her that when they were babies, some crazy lady stole her from the stroller and took her far, far away on a train. And then, she said, the crazy lady got tired of her, like a toy, and dumped her at an orphanage. That's what my adoptive parents told me," Alexa said. "And Mum asked her, 'How did you find me?' And Alexa said, 'Oh, just by chance. I saw you at the grocery store and followed you.' And Mum asked her why she didn't just come through the door like a normal person. And Alexa said, 'Coming through the door isn't interesting. I'm not normal.' She just kept saying all these wild things until Mum started to cry. But Mum still invited her to live with us, saying she was poor and unhappy, and her parents had abandoned her. Even though she looked rich, not like Mum at all," Ivy added, her voice holding a hint of childish resentment. Jared listened, holding his breath, the incredible story unfolding before him. It sounded unbelievable, like something from a movie. But what he now knew about Alexa, the deception he had just witnessed, was enough to make him believe every word the little girl was saying. "Truth be told, Alexa barely lived with us," Ivy continued. "She just crashed sometimes. She said she had a lot of work, but she never said where she worked. Then one day, she bought Mum a vacation voucher. She said, 'Here, you can take your kid to the ocean at least once.' And Mum cried," Ivy said, her voice softening. "She asked Alexa, 'Why are you spoiling us like this, Alexa?' But Alexa didn't listen to a word. So we went to Thailand. I didn't really like it there, to be honest. So many people, and the ocean was cold, and it rained. But when we came back," Ivy's voice dropped, barely a whisper, "when we came back, other people were living in our apartment." "What?" Jared gasped, his mind struggling to process this new betrayal. She sold it?" "Probably," Ivy said, her small face grim. "Alexa copied the ID and then forged it. Then she dressed up in Mum's clothes and used that ID to sign all the papers. And that was it. The apartment wasn't ours anymore. Mum went everywhere trying to get it back, and everywhere they told her, hire a lawyer, sue, but we don't have any money. That's how we ended up homeless, Ivy finished, her voice flat. And our stuff? Nobody knows where any of it went. I told Mum once if I ever saw Alexa again, I'd hurt her. Ivy's hands clenched into tiny fists. But Mum said, don't take that sin on yourself. She reminded me how Grandpa used to pray, but I'd still throw a rock at her head. Mum worked so hard, so we could have everything, and Alexa, she just took it all. Tears streamed down Ivy's small face, a silent torrent of childhood sorrow and anger. Jared buried his face in his hands, a wave of sickening realization washing over him. How could he have been so blind? How had he gotten entangled with such a ruthless, heartless con artist? And where, in the sprawling concrete jungle of the city, could he ever begin to look for her now? A sudden, urgent thought flashed through his mind, bright and clear. Call the police. But first, he felt an undeniable pull to meet Ivy's mother. When Ivy led him to the worn-down, unassuming building that served as their temporary shelter, more of a communal living space, really, than a true home, Jared felt a strange urge to simply embrace the slender, weary woman who emerged. She was astonishingly similar to Alexa, as he had known her in the hospital, a ghostly echo of her fragile beauty. But Taylor's eyes were different. They held a deep, lingering sadness, yet were warm and kind, like a gentle fading autumn light. Weeks later, a headline blared from the local news. Alexa and her accomplice, Dr. Cruz, were apprehended attempting to cross the border into Mexico, their lavish plans for escape shattered. The lead detective, a grizzled but empathetic man named Detective Riley, later explained the full chilling extent of Alexa's deception. She had indeed enrolled in university, briefly studying psychology, but her interest in academics had quickly waned, replaced by a thirst for easy money. She'd fallen in with a dangerous crowd, dabbling in petty larceny, and then swiftly graduated to a higher echelon of fraud, expertly charming wealthy, vulnerable men and siphoning their fortunes through a myriad of elaborate schemes. Her talent for pretense was truly extraordinary, a dark gift she wielded with chilling precision. When she had conspired with Dr. Cruz, the chief physician, he'd provided her with specialized additives for her perfume, subtle compounds designed to subtly influence men's subconscious minds. He also supplied a powerful sedative that induced a state of extreme muscle relaxation, allowing her to fake her dramatic collapse. He meticulously forged the results of expensive diagnostic procedures that were never performed, and signed off on exorbitant bills for medications that Alexa was never administered. All the ill-gotten gains flowed into a separate, untraceable account shared by the two conspirators. That night, when Jared had stormed into Alexa's hospital suite, ready to expose her with the video evidence, the con artist had simply vanished into Dr. Cruz's office, the key to which she had cunningly kept hidden in her silk peignoir as a failsafe. After waiting out his furious departure, they'd quietly slipped out of the city together, their getaway plan meticulously orchestrated. "So that's the whole story, Taylor," Jared said, his voice heavy with the weight of revelation, concluding his account in the cosy corner of a charming local cafe where he'd invited Taylor and Ivy for a much-needed meal. "Now, we need to figure out how to help you reclaim your property." "Is that even possible?" Taylor asked, her eyes widening in disbelief, a faint flicker of hope in their depths. "Well, I have the resources to hire an excellent lawyer," Jared assured her, a determined glint in his eye. "I'll help you." "Oh no, you don't have to." Taylor quickly waved her hands, a gesture of humble refusal. "I can't accept such a favour." But Jared gently caught her hand, his touch warm and firm, and brought it to his lips, a gesture of old-world gallantry. "Taylor," he said softly, his gaze earnest, "your daughter, Ivy, saved me from financial ruin, and who knows what deeper catastrophe might have unfolded if that con artist had actually married me. I might not even be alive right now. So, you could say, I owe Ivy my life." Taylor blushed, a delicate flush spreading across her cheeks. Lately, she had entirely forgotten what it felt like to be seen, truly seen, as a woman. Her grueling work, her hand-to-mouth existence, that had been the suffocating reality of her life. And here was this man, kissing her hand as if she were a lady of high society, a woman deserving of respect and tenderness. "So please," he continued, his voice gentle yet insistent, "allow me to take care of you. I truly believe everything will work out." With Jared's unwavering support, the astute lawyer he hired successfully argued Taylor's case, presenting irrefutable evidence that she had been out of the country when the fraudulent apartment sale took place, and before long the grateful mother and daughter joyfully returned to their rightful home, the familiar walls a balm to their weary souls. Jared helped Taylor secure a stable job at a newly opened diagnostic centre in the city. Then, one crisp autumn afternoon, he told her he wanted to introduce her to someone. She pulled up to a charming, older, 5-story brownstone building, its brick facade softened by climbing ivy, and Jared, ever the gentleman, gallantly offered her his hand. "Please," he said, ushering her inside. "Who lives here?" Taylor asked, her curiosity piqued. "You'll see in a moment," Jared replied, a warm smile playing on his lips. He rang the doorbell and the door was opened by Adeline, Alexa's adoptive mother. Jared greeted her warmly, and then Adeline's gaze fell upon Taylor. Her eyes welled with tears. "Alexa? My sweet Alexa, where have you been?" "I thought," Jared whispered to Taylor, his voice low and tender, as the emotional adoptive parents, overwhelmed, invited them in for tea, their excited chatter filling the small apartment, "that we shouldn't abandon them in their loneliness." "Us?" Taylor whispered back, her voice thick with emotion, a dawning realization blossoming in her heart. "Yes," Jared confirmed, his gaze holding hers, brimming with a quiet certainty. "I hope you can come to love me as much as I've come to love you." Ivy, meanwhile, was instantly smitten with her new grandparents. Of course, they weren't her biological family, but oh, how wonderful it was to have someone to visit, someone to bring smiles to. And the elderly couple, Adeline and Forrest, though they still grieved for their wayward Alexa, truly found comfort and a renewed purpose in the presence of Taylor and Ivy, embracing them as their own dear kin. And so, on the day of Jared and Taylor's wedding, Adeline and Forrest, looking every bit like proud parents, were seated in the place of honour, their faces beaming with joy. Ahead of this new family lay only a calm and happy future, built on honesty, forgiveness, and the enduring power of unexpected love.